I'd like to welcome everyone to our February speaker series featuring Lia. Now I'm going to misspell it, mispronounced it.
Gaertner.
Gaertner. I was not very good with languages because I couldn't really hear vowels very well. So now you know why. But she will be giving us a tick talk in a couple of minutes, and we're really looking forward to it. Ticks are something that's ever present in the Bay Area in virtually every environment that you walk into. And it's great to know more about them because Lyme disease can be very debilitating. I have a few important announcements. The first is this weekend is the 27th annual San Francisco Bay Flyway Festival. It's happening from Friday through Sunday. They have on their website a PDF of events, and we've placed that on our website as well. It's taking place, the focus area is Mare Island and the immediate vicinity, but there are also regional outings all throughout the immediate Bay Area there. Myrna Hayes is the director and has done a great job putting together a lot of events. It's going to be not only in person, but self-guided tours as well as virtual tours. I think the virtual tour schedule is being posted sometime tonight, or it will be up by tomorrow. Our very own Robin Leon is leading trips on Mare Island at 10 and 2 on Friday, and at 8:30 at American Canyon Wetlands on Saturday. Our education coordinator, Tammy Sanders, is leading Wetlands for Kids starting at 9:30 on Saturday. So if you have kids aged anywhere from 7 to 14 or so, give or take, please join Tammy at the American Canyon Wetlands parking lot. Murray Berner is leading Skaggs Island hawk watching Saturday and Sunday, both starting, I think he revised the time to 9:30. And unlike most years previously, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has asked us to only use the North Bridge. So the starting place is not along Highway 37. It is off from Ramal Road near Napa on the Skaggs Island Road, the north side of Skaggs Island Road. So we'll meet at the Skaggs Island Bridge near the Hooteman Slough boat ramp. Larry Broderick, a wonderful raptor man, is leading a Lynch Canyon walk Saturday at 10 a.m. Michelle Elliker is leading walks on the San Pablo Bay Trail 10:30 and 2:30 on Saturday. And Wally Neville is leading Mare Island Saturday, a 2:30 walk at the San Pablo Bay Trail Wetlands Trail. Then there are other people leading walks on Sunday. There's kayaking. So go to our website or go to the San Francisco Bay Flyway Festival website and look up the calendar of events. I have to make sure they just revised the starting time. I want everyone to know Murray Berner's Hawk Watch on Skaggs Island will start promptly at 9:30 at the north gate off from Skaggs Island Road off from Ramal Road near Napa. Andrew Ford's weekly walk, as a result, is being canceled to support the Flyway Festival activities. So there is no walk with Andrew Ford tomorrow. I'd like to proudly say that our education coordinator, Tammy Sanders, has been joined by Louisa Liu, a senior at UC Davis, to bring our amazing education programs to support schools, not only in Napa, but also Solano. So we brought on Louisa as she lives closer to Benicia and Fairfield, and she will begin school programs very soon, maybe as soon as the week after next. So Tammy's doing a great job. She's already presented a full suite of classes at Willow Elementary, and we're going back one more time to do a walking field trip with the kids and to share Maddie the hawk from Napa Rescue Center. The Napa Wildlife Rescue Center is going to team up with us and bring in hawks and other animals to share with the kids. It's very exciting for them to see real live birds and animals. So we're very excited about that. Our March speaker series, we're having Harry Fuller. He's now currently living in Oregon, but he is going to give a talk from Bodega to Oregon and the Great Basin, from shorebirding to searching for great gray owls. So be on the lookout for Harry Fuller, and that is Thursday, March the 10th. We are hoping to come out with our spring newsletter before long, so keep an eye out for it. We'll probably arrive somewhere in the vicinity of the end of February. There we go. And then finally, this year, for the first time in a few years, we're going to be having a spring big day on Saturday, May the 7th. The concept of a big day is to bring back a fun-filled birding day for both Napa and Solano counties. You can either host or join a team of birders to see how many different species you can see in one day. You can either do it just for fun, or you can sponsor a team and help us raise funds for our many activities. The emphasis will be on a fun day of birding. So that will happen on Saturday, May the 7th. So be on the lookout for more information on that in our newsletter. So I think I've said almost everything I need to. So we will turn our program over now to Lia. So let's give her a nice warm welcome. We have almost 40 people, Lia, that are here ready to speak. And Lia, you can share your screen and that will get us going here.
Okay. Can you see and hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. So I hope that my computer and Zoom will cooperate. But thank you so much for inviting me, Barbara, and all of you at the Napa Solano Audubon Society. My name, as he said, is Lia Gaertner, and I am the Director of Education and Outreach at the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. We are a Silicon Valley-based nonprofit, and here we go. Let's see. Okay, you guys are in the corner up here. We were founded in 2011 by a group of Silicon Valley mothers, some of whom had been misdiagnosed for years before they figured out that they had Lyme disease from California ticks. And our overhead is covered by a grant, so 100% of all donations go directly to research initiatives. We're not so much an advocacy group. We do a little bit of education, but our primary focus is funding scientific research. So we work with Stanford, Johns Hopkins, UCSF. We funded the first Stanford and Harvard Tick-Borne disease research conference here at Stanford a couple of years ago. Well, I guess with COVID, it's been 3 or 4 years ago. And we host a quarterly speaker series with different speakers, and usually doctors, usually a doctor and a patient, or a scientist and a patient quarterly. And we do in-service events like this. So basically, Lyme disease is a bacteria that is infected, in the human body, and it becomes a disease, but it's a bacteria that's transmitted by a tick from a tick bite. And I'm going to try to make this as interesting as possible. I know that you guys are into ornithology and ecology, and so I am going to keep this at a pretty high scientific level. And I know that this is being recorded, so if you want to go back and try to get some of the more complicated stuff later, you can. But I'm just going to kind of throw a lot of information at you because I find it so fascinating. So ticks are very abundant across the United States. They're across the world. They are in most of the world. And these are just some of the ticks in the US. The ones that are circled are the ones that we'll be mostly talking about today because they're the primary vectors of Lyme disease. But a lot of these ticks carry other viruses and pathogens. So, one of these ticks can cause an alpha-gal meat allergy from its bite. Another one can cause a virus that's fatal a large percent of the time. And they carry different things. But right now we're going to focus on these two, the black-legged tick, which is on the East Coast primarily, more on the East Coast, and the Western black-legged tick, which is more on the West Coast. So up at the top, you'll see this spiral-shaped squiggly bacteria. That's the Lyme disease bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi, and it is closely related to syphilis. That it's a spirochetal spiral bacteria, and it can infect any part of the body like syphilis. They used to say, the doctors used to say, to know syphilis is to know all of medicine, because it can present anywhere in your body. It can present as neurological issues or rheumatological issues. So to keep it pretty basic, that's the bacteria. And then down below are some of the other pathogens that ticks can carry. And we'll talk a little bit about those later, but these are some of the organisms that ticks carry. Lyme was named Lyme disease, and it's not Lyme's, it's Lyme, because it was discovered first time in the US in Lyme, Connecticut. And there was our foundation was started by a group of moms who decided to get active. Lyme, Connecticut had a group of moms who got very active because they noticed a cluster of juvenile arthritis, and they noticed a bunch of kids and adults who were having mysterious swelling of their joints and not feeling well. And so this one mom, Polly Murray, got very active and convinced the government to come and investigate. So they sent down a scientist who'd been brought over from Switzerland to do bioweapon defense after World War II. And he figured out that these kids and some adults were getting sick from a bacteria that was in the ticks. So they named the bacteria after him. So the bacteria is called Borrelia burgdorferi, and this Swiss researcher is named Willy Burgdorfer. Mark, are you guys hearing me okay and everything? Yeah, okay. You can just nod.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you great.
Okay, just check.
Thanks.
So there are around 500,000 estimated new cases of Lyme disease annually. That does not include chronic infections, but those are new cases each year estimated by the Center for Disease Control. And Lyme disease is the most common vector-borne infectious disease in the USA, and it's right at the top for infectious diseases, at least before COVID. So as you can see, the incidents are being reported more and more often. And it seems like the cases are going up. And it seems like the people most impacted are the people who have time to recreate outdoors. So the young and maybe the retired. It seems like we know that kids are the most affected, but it looks like, as you get older, maybe you have more time to recreate outdoors. Ticks are parasitic arachnids. They're in the spider family, but they're closer to mites. And they have been around for at least 200 million years. And this is the same tick that we were talking about, the black-legged tick. This is a female, and this just shows the stages while it is feeding off a host that has blood, and it's sort of sucking the blood through its mouth parts, which I'll show you later. But this is how it looks in various stages as it feeds and feeds and feeds. And this is a poster we have in our house. I just think it's kind of neat. It's a history of existing life, and it has all of life on Earth sort of on this tree, going back millions of years. And it shows at the very top, primates evolved, right at the very end of this timeline here. And then if you go back to the bottom, millions and millions of years ago, you see these ancient spirochetes, these Lyme bacteria. So these guys have evolved to survive. And ticks have been a major way that they survive. This is a 5,300-year-old mummy found in the Alps. This is Otzi the Iceman, and they think they found Borrelia bacteria in him. The Center for Disease Control put this out a few years ago. It's so gross. I'm sorry if some of you are eating dinner, but these are small, probably nymphal, baby ticks. And they put them here, 5 of them on top of a poppy seed muffin to show you how small they can be. This is a tick in my daughter's ear. This is not a black-legged tick. This is, it's called a dog tick. Ticks of all kinds get on dogs, but this one's just called a dermacenter or a dog tick. And this is a baby. And these are the babies, the larvae. And this is a picture that my colleague just sent me. She found this nymphal wet black-legged tick on her iPhone. So the left 2 pictures are the black-legged tick. We call them Ixodes ticks. And the right one is the dog tick, the dermacenter tick that I was talking about. They like to get on you and your dogs and your pets by questing. So they hang out on the edge of a piece of grass. Usually, I mean, they can be anywhere, but you'll see them. If you look closely, when you take your next hike, you will probably see them on the trail, right on the edges of the trail, hanging out on the end of a piece of grass. I just saw 2 today in my on the hill above my house. So they quest and they wait for a ride, and then they try to feed. So this is the life cycle of a tick. It's about 2 to 3 years. It starts with the eggs, a couple thousand of them, and then they become a larvae, and they have a meal on a small bird or lizard, and then they become a nymph. And then they have a meal, they can go for a larger meal like us or a dog, and then they become an adult. And then the females usually are the ones who will feed their eggs. Another time, those are the ones that might feed on us. Sometimes the males will feed on humans, but most of the time it's a female looking to feed her eggs. There are different hosts for all those ticks. So the ticks are hosting the bacteria, but who hosts the ticks? It's deer, we'll go into it later, but there are lots of animals that host ticks, including birds. And it's a little bit different on the East Coast and the West Coast in the middle of the country. And it also is a little different what those hosts and what those ticks are carrying in terms of the different bacteria and viruses. Here in California, the Western gray squirrel is the most involved in the Lyme disease tick cycle. The Western fence lizard as well, the mice, California voles, the dusky-footed wood rat has been studied to be a host for ticks and Lyme disease. But the Western gray squirrel, it looks like from the studies that we've funded, is sort of the highest pathogen transmission. So interesting story. The Western fence lizards are these miracle animals, reptiles, and they have a complement protein in their blood that kills the Lyme bacteria. So if a tick that's infected with the Lyme bacteria feeds on a lizard, which they do like to feed on lizards, in theory, the tick will come off clean. And if it bites you next, you won't be infected with the Lyme bacteria. So there is not much funding in Lyme disease research, and no one has so far come up with a way to produce that complement protein that cleans the ticks of the Borrelia. But some people say that that's why the rates of Lyme disease are lower on the West Coast, because we have this Western fence lizard and the East Coast doesn't have them. I tried to bring birds into this talk. I don't usually talk so much about birds, but there is a lot of information, especially in the last 3 years, about how migratory birds are moving Lyme disease and other tick-borne diseases and ticks around the world. So this says a mass migration would deliver more ticks and likely more diseases to Canada in coming years in the form of beautiful waves of song sparrows and wrens, red-winged blackbirds and warblers. That was in 2018. And then if you look more recently, there are actually lots of studies that show that that is indeed the case. I have to move you guys to a different corner. So this was a headline from an article: millions of ticks hitch rides on birds. Up to 39 million Central and South American exotic ticks seem to be transported to the US annually on migratory songbirds. True thrushes were found to be the riskiest bird species for Lyme transmission in this study, although I'll show you another one that has something different. Passerines or perching birds also had a high competence, as did birds that primarily eat seeds, as well as those that forage on the ground, which of course puts them, at the highest risk of questing ticks. And ticks also lay their eggs in leaf litter. So being in leaf litter can be a high risk place because those eggs become larvae and then they can be quite numerous in the leaf litter. So this says the highest risk species of birds tended to breed and spend the winter at high latitudes and low elevations. They also have a broad flight ranges reaching across the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. And it says the golden crowned sparrow, a non-resident species, could be an important reservoir for Borrelia burgdorferi, which is the Lyme bacteria in California. And then this UC Berkeley study I found says birds as Lyme disease reservoirs. Lyme disease spirochetes, the bacteria, were detected in 57 of the 100 birds that carried ticks. Among the ticks themselves, 13% of the larvae and 25% of the nymphs were infected with the Lyme bacteria or related spirochetes. So you guys know a lot more about birds than I do, but it said among the 23 species of birds that were infected, the study authors highlighted the lesser goldfinch, oak titmouse, and dark-eyed junco, I hope I said that right, as birds that harbored more subtypes of Lyme disease bacteria than others. In addition, the golden crowned sparrow was infected more frequently than other species. And they also found another species of Borrelia, so another kind of Lyme-related bacteria when they did that study, and they actually found that this other bacteria, which is common in Europe, was actually more common than the typical Lyme bacteria, but it can still make people pretty sick. So that was interesting. This is, you don't need to read this. It's just an example of a study I saw where they found all these birds and tested them to see if they had some of these other infections that ticks carry. So rickettsia, which is the Rocky Mountain spotted fever group, and babesia, which is it's a malaria-like red blood cell infection. So these are the birds that they tested, and these are the pathogens that they were carrying. We have different kinds of ticks all over the US, and we have ticks that carry different kinds of pathogens. So they carry different bacteria and viruses, and this is just a sampling of them. Ticks are causing Lyme disease and related diseases in Europe, in China, in Mexico, and all over. It's not just a US thing. Some of I don't mean to scare you all, but like this is the meat allergy I was talking about from the Lone Star tick, which we're finding more and more. We actually think we just found some in California for the first time. And we have these red blood cell infections, babesia and anaplasma. And then in California, we just discovered, I think in 2014, a new Lyme-related species called Borrelia miyamotoi, which causes relapsing fever. And unfortunately, if you go to your doctor won't be able to test you for that because we don't even have a human diagnostic for it readily available. So it's a very complicated world with these tick bites. So this is from the California Department of Public Health. If you go to a doctor and say, I'm concerned I had a tick bite, or I didn't even see a tick bite, but I have these symptoms and I'm wondering if I can get tested, or can we talk about the possibility, and they say, no, there are no tick-borne diseases in California, then just quietly try to educate them and take them to the California Department of Public Health, or even Kaiser has, a whole section on Lyme disease and tick-borne disease on their website, but just show them something like this from the California Department of Public Health website and say, look, these are what we're finding, in California. These ticks and these diseases do exist. And these are the kind of tick habitats that they tend to prefer, which is, in my mind, that is kind of a silly graphic, because it's like everything. It's like everywhere. It's like urban, rural, whatever. So as I said, ticks carry different diseases and pathogens, and they can actually carry more than one at once, which is a super bummer. But these are, this is a study that tested ticks and, to see what was inside of them. And several of them had 3 different pathogens inside of them, or 4 of them. So if a tick bites somebody, and they get symptoms, it can be really hard, almost impossible for a doctor to figure out what pathogens they might have and how to treat them, because we don't even have tests for all of these, and it's complicated. So why is Lyme disease becoming more and more known? Why does it seem like it's becoming more of a pandemic? It's partly climate change, or mostly climate change is what the science is showing. People are moving out more into wooded areas, and so they're having closer relationship with animals, and so coming in contact with ticks more. But definitely the EPA in 2014 added Lyme disease as an indicator of climate change. One of the studies that we did, one of our fun, and most of our studies are lab studies, we're looking for cures and diagnostics for tick-borne diseases. But one of our fun ecology studies was we had people send ticks from all over the US, from their dog or their yard or themselves or whatever. And they sent them to a lab that we were working with, that we funded, and at a university, and they identified the ticks and then tested the ticks to see what they were carrying. And so they came up with more ticks in more places than the CDC had known about, because they're not actually studying this stuff. And these are some of the places where our scientists found ticks and different diseases in new places. So you probably could guess, but the ecology of an area, of a county really can change drastically. So what we find in our studies that we fund is that, the range of positive ticks can range from 0.3, and then you go within the same county a few miles away, and you've got 25% of the ticks are positive. So it really depends on the ecology of the area. This is hot off the press from last year. But this is a study we funded in the Bay Area that showed ticks living in the grasses in the chaparral near the beach. And they're not in the sand. They didn't really study the sand, but they definitely were in the chaparral and the grasses on the way to the beach. In one area, in Bolinas Lagoon in Marin County, 31% of the ticks were positive for something. And this just shows the first number is Borrelia burgdorferi, which is the Lyme bacteria. And then the second number on the next column is Borrelia miyamotoi, which is the newly discovered relapsing fever bacteria. So we actually have a lot more of that here than we do the Lyme bacteria, which is more common on the East Coast. So the testing that we do in humans that have symptoms is not testing for the right pathogen most of the time. There is, this is from the California Department of Public Health. This is the seasonal risk of exposure to infected blacklegged ticks, Western blacklegged ticks. It's basically year round, but definitely spring is when nymphs are most active. And because of the Western fence lizard, it's complicated, but because of the Western fence lizard, the nymphs here are actually the most likely to be infected with a pathogen. Well, I'll just tell you why. I think I can do it quickly. Because when the nymphs feed on a Western fence lizard, they'll come off clean. So by the time they're an adult, they might be clean. So the nymphs are the most dangerous because they're small and people don't usually see them, and because they do have higher rates of disease. So a lot of people think you have to have a bullseye rash to have Lyme disease, and that's just completely not true. On the East Coast, it is more common. But it's even the CDC has recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, corrected their website to say that it's actually more common to have a not bullseye rash, but just a simple solid red rash, which is what I had myself. But that's confusing because most doctors think you have to have a bullseye rash, and it's maybe 30% out here will have a bullseye rash or a rash at all. So it's very confusing. Most people get misdiagnosed with ringworm or a spider bite or an allergic reaction to the tick bite, which you can have a localized reaction to the tick bite. But these rashes kind of come after about 3 days after the tick bite, and they can keep expanding for up to, a few weeks, up to 30 days or so. So this is from the CDC website. Unfortunately, it's incorrect. They say that rash occurs in 70 to 80% of infected persons, but the more recent information shows that that's not true. You can read more about these rashes later. After the first few weeks, within the first few weeks, people might have flu-like symptoms, muscle pain, fevers, palpitations, stiff neck, things like that, and then, or swollen joints. Sorry, this is, yeah. And then later, they can develop more neurological symptoms or other symptoms, which I won't scare you with. But the scariest one is that it can go to the heart and it can cause Lyme Carditis. And that usually is not properly diagnosed because Lyme is not on most cardiologists' mind, unfortunately. And so people end up with pacemakers, or the CDC published a case study with 5 young people with sudden death from Lyme Carditis. Usually it's not the case, but it is important for people to understand that if they're having sudden onset cardiac issues, that they might want to get evaluated for tick-borne disease. So this is a study of the largest patient survey in the US. I think it's, I don't know what they're up to, many thousands of patient respondents. It's another organization called LymeDisease.org, and they work with some scientists at I think Cedars-Sinai on mylymedata.org, which is a fabulous resource. But this is what they came up with for how most people who responded had been improperly diagnosed before they finally figured out that they had a tick-borne disease. So a lot of people get shuttled to psychiatrists because they're coming in and their blood work looks fine because the doctors never thought to test for these diseases. And so they end up with the psychiatrist, or they get diagnosed with fibromyalgia for, muscle pain and fatigue. They get thyroid disorders, rheumatoid arthritis for their arthritis, multiple sclerosis, systemic lupus, learning disabilities, Parkinson's, ALS, etc. And it's possible to have those diseases and a tick-borne disease, and that there's evidence that tick-borne diseases can trigger autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. So it's complex. The diagnostics aren't great, as I mentioned. I used to, before COVID, I had to explain a lot about the problem with antibody testing. Now people know what an antibody is, but the current tests were developed in the 80s and were never meant to be used as diagnostic tests in the way that they are. And they're about as good as flipping a coin. So US Congress they know that there needs to be more work on this, and they're putting a little bit of funding towards it, but not enough. This is a graphic. It's a little bit, might be a little bit outdated, but I think it's still pretty accurate. If you have 100 people with Lyme disease and only 50% or 30% have a rash or see a tick, and only 50% of those people know that having a tick bite or a rash is a problem, so they only 50% see a doctor, and then they get tested, but current testing misses 60% of the positives, you're going to end up with very few people who are properly diagnosed and treated. And that's why our foundation was started by people who had that problem. So obviously, after all that scary stuff, you want to avoid tick bites. Ticks, luckily they don't jump. They, like I said, they quest and they wait for a meal. So you have quite a bit of control. They do crawl up when they sense heat and carbon dioxide, and they inject an analgesic. So usually you don't feel the bite. Sometimes people do. And like I said, most people with Lyme disease don't actually remember being bitten because they're very small sometimes. Let's see. I don't know how to stop that. I mean, I'm at my husband's desk, so we'll just let that go. So they say the CDC website says like 24 to 36 hours. If the tick is attached to you for 24 to 36 hours, then or less than 36 hours, then you're okay. The science is proving that to be wrong. So take that with a grain of salt. As I said, some of these pathogens, the viruses on the East Coast and sort of Midwest area, some of them can be transmitted in 15 minutes. So it's best to get the tick off as soon as possible. This is an engorged tick, the one that's been feeding. It gets quite deformed, full of blood. And then on the right, you see the microscopic picture of the mouth part, the tick mouth part, and that's how it sort of saws its way in, and then it has a little straw to get that blood. So back to prevention, you want to stay on trails. I sometimes will I walk in the very center of the trail, and if there are grasses sticking out, I just, I'll step over it or around it. I try really hard not to brush by those long stalks of grass that come out into the trail. I try not to sit in leaf litter. I try not to sit on logs. I check the log first as much as I possibly can if I have to sit down. It's great to wear light colored clothing when you're out so that you can see the ticks if they crawl on you, and you can flick them off. They recommend wearing long pants and a hat. Like I said, ticks don't jump, but they can fall off trees, or they can, if you're brushed by a branch, they could be on there. And then you can tuck your pants into your socks, since ticks like to crawl up. So if they're on the ground or, on a low piece of grass, then if you tuck your socks into your pants into your socks, it's easier for you to see them on the outside. And we'll talk about repellent. One of the most important things to do when you come inside, and I'm not going to say come inside from a hike or nature, because one of my best friends in Sebastopol just got her second Lyme tick from her yard. So, when you come inside, I guess you've been sort of out in some kind of grass or nature. It's ideal to run your clothes through the hot dryer for 10 to 20 minutes. And then that should kill the ticks. Our colleague, her teens went on a hike and came back, and she made them put their clothes in the dryer, and she cleaned out the lint trap, and there were 16 ticks in the lint trap. So, and they're dead. So that's good. And then shower, and then tick check yourself, or have someone tick check you if possible. I joke that this is how I go out into nature. It's not exactly accurate, but I have gone on tick collecting expeditions, and I pretty much really did wear like a painter's suit. And this is what researchers will wear. You, on the other hand, don't have to do that. You could wear repellent. So there is Permethrin, which is a repellent that you put on your clothes, not for skin. And you can actually buy pre-treated or have your clothes sent for treatment. And those last, they say, for 70 washes, and still are repellent for ticks. And they, it's supposed to be fairly not dangerous. It's derived from pyrethrin. It's a pyrethrin derived from chrysanthemum flowers. However, there was recently a study talking a little bit about some of the less desirable effects. So I I have used these gaiters before that are permethrin treated, and it does seem like it sort of stuns the ticks and they're less likely to crawl up. The US military now requires all issued clothing and uniforms to be treated with permethrin. And a lot of the fire departments and police departments, I think, are also using permethrin treated clothing, and park rangers. And this is from one of my favorite Lyme literate doctors. She says an ounce of permethrin is worth a pound of antibiotics, because antibiotics is generally how Lyme disease is treated. I use this oil of lemon eucalyptus. It's a type of eucalyptus oil. I think it's from Australia, and it is EPA approved for as a tick repellent. So I just feel better about that, and I feel okay using that on my skin when I have to. This is from the CDC. It says to, really check around sort of the cozy areas. They like to get in underneath, your waistband, or somewhere kind of your underarms or back of your neck. I say you need to check everywhere, because the last few ticks I've gotten off me or my family have all not been in these places, just sort of in the middle of the back or the middle of the thigh or something. So in theory, they say all these sort of dark areas, but I don't find that to be necessarily true. Really important is to know how to remove a tick properly, because what you don't want to do is squish the body, because if you squish the body, you're basically squirting the bacteria right back into you. So you want to try your best to have proper tick removers, which is basically sharp tweezers or a specialized tick removal tool. And you want to get as close to your skin as possible and close to the head of the tick as possible, and not squeeze the body. None of those things, Vaseline, oils, alcohol, matches, have been proven to be safe or effective. So you want to get the tick out as quickly as possible. And then you want to save it in a Ziploc bag with a moist paper towel. And you can save it for identification and testing. Do not throw it away if you can at all. If you're in a pinch, people say you can use a credit card and try to scrape it off, if you're in the middle of the wilds and you have a credit card. But you just try to get it off as soon as possible and save it. This is a tick I took off my dog. It's engorged. And it was a Western black-legged tick, an Ixodes pacificus tick. And that's the tool that I used. I used the one at the top. Oh no, actually I used the Bayer Lyme Foundation tick key. But if the tick is really small, or if it's in a human, I'll use the tick ease tick remover that's above, because it's got those really fine tip tweezers that are great for the baby or the nymphal ticks. I send my ticks to tickreport.com, which is at the University of Massachusetts, but other people at my office send it to Ecology, which is in Colorado, private company. You can send it to some of the local health departments, but they only test for the East Coast strain of the Lyme bacteria, and Tick Report and Ecology will test for 16 different pathogens that are more likely to be found in California. So those tests are around $50, and I think they're highly worth it. They usually will turn around with your results of what the tick species is, whether it's been feeding for a while, and what pathogens it might be carrying. And they'll usually get you those results by email within 3 business days. You can also try to identify the tick yourself, and then decide if you want to send it in for testing. There's a good website called tickencounter.org at the University of Rhode Island. I think they're missing one of our California ticks, but it's a good place to start. And then there are other companies, Tick Check and Igenics, and you can investigate those. This is a report from my friend who just had her second positive Lyme tick from her backyard up in Sonoma County. And so you can see the red circled area says Borrelia burgdorferi detected, and the tick was identified as Ixodes pacificus. So it was that kind of tick that we've been looking at with the red body, and it was positive for the strain of Lyme bacteria that we've been talking about most. Here is a clean tick that this is a report that I sent to Tick Report. I mean, this is a tick that I sent to Tick Report, and they sent it back. It was from my dog, and it was negative for all of these things. So all these different kinds of rickettsia and babesia and all these different kinds of things. So it's important to watch for symptoms and know what to look for in terms of symptoms, and then advocate for yourself, because there's a lot of under information in this area in the medical field. And it's usually a lot of work for Lyme patients or tick-borne disease patients to get properly diagnosed and treated. Antibiotics, it's usually a few weeks of doxycycline is the standard treatment for Lyme disease. But if you have some of the other pathogens, you might need other medicines. So it's important to have a doctor that understands these things. And there's a group of what they call Lyme literate doctors. It's an organization called ILADS, International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society. And those doctors tend to really focus on this stuff. Sometimes they're infectious disease doctors, sometimes they're not. It would be great if all infectious disease doctors were up on the most recent research in this area, but they usually are not. So I don't know if you guys have an actual office, but I just wanted to offer that we can provide signs, shower signs, bathroom signs, trailhead signs, and we have those tick removers, and we can help. We can send you handouts and brochures, and it's really nice to have repellent available for your staff and volunteers and visitors. And I think that's it. I'm a little bit ahead of time here because I wanted to get it all in, but the moral of the story is that we still really want people to get outdoors and to nature. I mean, it's what we all love more than anything, and I know that you guys all love it too. And the only thing we want to do is make sure that people are educated so that they don't get into trouble. And hearing all of this scary stuff is hard, but it makes you much less likely to get into trouble and to end up in one of these situations. Now that you know what to look for and it's familiar to you, you are actually a lot safer than before you had to hear all this hard stuff. So we all go out into nature and we just do our best to protect ourselves. And sometimes we get tick bites and we send it in. And if it's positive, which, ours has not been, we deal with it. So it's just a matter of knowing. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm available for questions.
Well, Lia, that was a wonderful presentation on ticks. I can't believe how much you are knowledgeable about this. One of the chat questions that was asked is if you're bitten and it's not discovered for a long period of time, like months or years, do antibiotics still work to eliminate the bacteria?
That's a great question. And most of the time, yes. So the statistics are, according to Johns Hopkins, the scientists we work with there, if you have a bullseye rash, because the way that they study these people is, the inclusion criteria for these studies are very strict. So they have to have a known tick bite and a bullseye rash. And of those people who come into their study who are properly treated with 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics, 20% of those people will go on and have chronic late stage infections. So we don't know if that's because they were treated with the wrong antibiotic because they weren't tested for the actual pathogen that they have, or whether it's because we also have science coming out of Tulane University and other universities that are collaborating that show that the Lyme bacteria can actually persist and survive antibiotics. They can go into these sort of cyst-like forms where they form a hard sort of shell around them, or they form a biofilm, and then the antibiotics can't penetrate. And the bacteria also like to hide in very in parts of the body where there's not a lot of blood flow, so avascular areas. So they like to hide in the joints and the brain. And so it's, when you take antibiotics, it's going through the blood to get everywhere, and it can't always get to some of these places where the bacteria are hiding. So sometimes people will have these persistent infections. And to answer the question, people who don't discover it until later and have late stage or Lyme disease, like I did, they usually have to have a longer course of antibiotics and a more comprehensive treatment. So the CDC recommends intravenous or IV antibiotics with stronger antibiotics in those cases. And in the world, the Lyme literate world, sometimes people will be on antibiotics off and on for months or years. Nobody wants to use antibiotics a lot. Everyone knows it messes with your microbiome, and everyone worries about resistance. But so far, the bacteria don't appear to have antibiotic resistance, and they don't appear to get worse. And there are some herbs that have been, my husband was actually a co-author with Johns Hopkins, funded by the Bay Area Lyme Foundation, looking at different herbs to treat Lyme disease. And there's garlic and a bunch of different herbs that were shown to be more effective in the test tube, more effective than antibiotics at killing the bacteria. So I'm not saying everyone should go take herbs. I think everyone probably needs to see their doctor and figure out the combination of antibiotics and herbs and supplements and diet, and people need to optimize their immune system. There are also studies that show that people, there was a study years ago out of Mendocino, and granted the diagnostic tests are terrible, but it showed that a bunch of the controls that, they had Lyme patients come in and they tested them for Lyme, and then they had controls, the healthy population, come in, and a good percentage of the controls tested positive too. So either that shows that the testing is bad, or it shows that people can live with Lyme disease and be perfectly healthy if their immune system can handle it. And so it might be a question of load. And so definitely if you're sick, it's good to optimize your immune system, or before you get sick, of course, it's best to optimize your immune system. But it's usually for those people who have late stage disease, it's not a simple one-prong approach. It's usually a multifaceted approach. I was taking 80 supplements and pills a day plus shots, changed my diet, worked on exercise, did homeopathy. I don't think I did much, but I did acupuncture. I just tried everything. And in the end, it was a combination of pharmaceuticals and I think, green juice that ended up helping. I mean, it's different for everybody. Everyone's got a different story, but.
Wow, that's amazing. I just like to share an anecdote because a lot of people don't realize how serious Lyme disease can be. I have a very good birding friend from Marin who we bird with fairly regularly, who suddenly got dizzy and sick and short of breath. He wasn't sure what happened. He went to the doctor. They weren't sure. They couldn't diagnose anything. Gave him lots of tests. It got worse and worse. He was eventually put in the hospital, eventually then into the ICU. And at some point later, they discovered it was Lyme disease. So he was been treated for antibiotics for over 6 months, I think. And this is a year and a half or 2 years later, he still feels that he's only about 80 or 90% of what he was originally. And he's 10 or 15 years younger than I am. And it can be very serious. And he didn't realize that he'd been bitten, I don't believe. So it's everything in combination with what you've said. So.
Yeah, we hear that story too much. And there are a lot of celebrities that have come out with their stories. Alec Baldwin and Shania Twain and Justin Bieber. I mean, a lot of people have, even with the access to the best medical care, they still struggle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's good to know about it so that you can get it fast.
So I'll just quickly, or Tom, do you want to go through some of the questions people asked in the chat? Is Tom still there?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. You go ahead and check it out.
So, so someone said the Pacific Coast tick looks like the tick that usually bites me. What percentage of our ticks, I think, are the Pacific Coast tick? Is that the red-legged tick, or is that
the black-legged tick? Yeah, it's the well, it's not called a Pacific Coast tick. It's the Western black-legged tick, or the Ixodes pacificus tick. But yeah, that translates to Pacific Coast tick. I don't know. I don't think we have an idea of what percentage of ticks, because no one's actually done like a full study. But depending on the area, you can look at some of our studies from the Bay Area Lyme Foundation and see in your area if they've sampled there, and what percentage of ticks were Ixodes pacificus ticks and what percent were dermacenter. Usually around here we have the dog tick, the dermacenter tick, and then we have the Ixodes, the Western black-legged tick, and on the East Coast they call it the deer tick. But we actually have some new tick species that are probably flying in with birds or travel or whatever. We have some surprise ticks out here now too.
So is the black-legged tick smaller than the deer tick?
The black-legged tick is the deer tick, but like
smaller than the dog tick, yeah.
Okay, yes. Yes, the Ixodes pacificus adult female would be probably smaller than the dermacenter dog tick adult female. Yeah. And the male Ixodes pacificus black-legged tick is usually really small and all black. Okay. And then the female has that red. Okay. And then the dermacenter dog ticks are sort of more brown and mottled and gray and cream, and they can be all kinds of different colors. But when they're nymphs, when they're babies, it's really hard to tell them apart. Okay. Yeah.
And nymphs are more common in the spring, you said, so.
Yeah.
So another question. Okay, so is there a blood factor that can be diagnosed, or do they have to find the bacteria in your blood? How does that work?
Well, part of the research that we're constantly doing or funding is trying to do exactly that. We're trying to find the bacteria in the blood or by PCR. But it's really hard because, like I said, the bacteria like to hide in the avascular areas. So they're hiding in the joints and they're hanging out and they're not free flowing in the blood. So they say that, to catch one of the bacteria in a blood sample is like trying to find one redfish in a lake with a bucket. What are your chances of dipping in and finding that exact redfish? So the tests right now are antibody based tests. And the antibody-based tests are best about 5 weeks after the infection. So after the bite, your antibody levels at 5 weeks are about where they're getting is optimal for that test. But before that, it's too soon. You haven't mounted the antibodies, and then after that, they can start to wane. So that test is not great, and we are constantly looking for new tests.
Okay, that's important to know. And someone asked a great question here: is the warm, dry weather spell we're having right now bringing out nymphs?
I don't know about that. Somebody else asked me that today. Is it worse tick year than usual? And I haven't heard anything yet, but what I do know is that the wetter tick years, wetter winters can lead to more acorn production, and then more acorns feed the rodents, and then the rodents feed the ticks. And so we're having a dry winter, so I don't know what the spring is going to look like.
Any other questions for Lia before we wrap things up?
Hey, Mark, I had one. The chemical from the flower of the plant that they use for coating clothing. Do you personally have your clothes coated with that stuff, or is that something that is fairly common for people, or is it mainly withheld for park rangers and fire people and stuff like that?
Oh no, you can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it at REI. I use it only like if my kids are going camping in Mendocino, or I'm going camping in Mendocino, which is a very high prevalence area for Lyme disease. But I don't use it on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
So Tom, when we went to Costa Rica, they encouraged us to coat our our pants with that.
Oh.
I can never pronounce it. Is it?
Some people say permethrin, some say permethrin.
Yeah, permethrin. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyways, but we found very few bugs because we were there during the dry season. So I guess we've been wearing the same pants here. Probably more important to wear them here than in Costa Rica during the dry season. Don't know. Any other questions? People have asked great questions. Oh, here's someone from the East Coast. They live on the East Coast. I've been told by doctors to take 200 milligram doxycycline antibiotic tablets as soon as you realize you've been bitten within the first 24 hours. That prevents you from catching it.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a sore spot. We in the research community are not fans of that protocol. It's based on a study that's not a good study, and it's one study, and it's absolutely misleading, because what it does is it will prevent the rash from forming, but it doesn't prevent the disease from disseminating. And so you end up in a tricky situation where you look like you don't have Lyme because you don't have the rash, but you might still have Lyme. So like I said, there's not enough research on any of this, and it's mind-blowing how much there is to learn. But the most recent information says that if you were for sure wanted to be really careful, you would take a few weeks of doxycycline.
So if we, excuse me, if we wanted to lobby with someone to try to get more funding for Lyme research, who would we lobby with? Our senators, our congressmen, the CDC? But
Yeah,
best
yeah.
agency to go to?
Actually, there's a very handy way. And I swear I didn't put you up to this, everyone. I didn't put him up to this.
I asked that out of the blue.
One of our colleagues, one of the women who founded this foundation, left and founded an organization that does that. It's called Center for Lyme Action, and they're having their fly-in, even though it's virtual, later this month. And they do work on lobbying, and they have increased the amount of funding from the federal government by millions in the past couple of years. They've helped along with other patient-led advocacy groups, but still, I could show you a chart, but like the funding for every other disease is just 1,000 million times higher than it is for Lyme. I think Zika got 4.5 billion or something in the same year, and that affected very few people in this country. It's an important one, but Lyme, was affecting more people than, I forgot what the statistic is, but it's like heart attacks and some kind of cancer combined. And there was like 20 million funding for tick-borne disease, and hardly any of that was for Lyme disease. It was more like for biological, more random sort of bioweapon research. So there's a lot to do. There is something called LymeX, which is a partnership, private government partnership with a foundation, and they just put 25 million in for a prize for people who want to do this kind of research. So there's some government interest, and there is a congressional committee working on this.
Great.
So the fence lizard, is it only active against Lyme, or is it against other types of tick-borne diseases?
That's a great question. And as soon as somebody funds that research, I will let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm only going to hike in areas with fence lizards from now on.
Yeah.
No, when I see them out on the sidewalk of the trail, I'm so happy.
Well, can you carry your own personal fence lizard with you to?
Right. I was asked by one of our researchers on the East Coast if I could send some lizard blood. She's like, "Oh, you just clip the nail off, like the toe, and then you just sort of squeeze. I just need a little bit of that lizard blood, but you have to get permission from the state." And we never sort of finished the research project, but.
Well, Lia, thank you so much. This has been a very, very informative talk, and I hope people have learned as much as I have. And I thought I knew a fair amount, and a lot of what I knew are actually misconceptions. So we greatly appreciate this talk. we'll see if we can't get some of our folks trained so they can share the knowledge with others. I want to remind people not to miss out on the 27th San Francisco Bay Flyway Festival that's happening starting tomorrow through Sunday, with many guided walks, self-guided tours, and also virtual tours. Go to our website. There is a link to their website, and there's also a download of the schedule of events. It's possible I have a previous copy on our website, so don't forget, if you're going to hawk watch with Murray Berner on Skaggs Island Saturday or Sunday, it starts at 9:30, not 10. So be there by 9:30, because once they go through the gate, it gets locked and you'll miss out. Another great birder, Larry Broderick, is leading a Lynch Canyon Saturday hike at 10 a.m. And Robin Leong, our very own Robin Leong, is leading walks tomorrow at Mare Island, one at 10, one at 2, and in American Canyon Wetlands on Saturday at 8:30. And Tammy Sanders, our education coordinator, is leading American Canyon Wetlands for Kids Saturday at 9:30. So don't miss out on all that fun. Once again, Andrew Ford's weekly walk is canceled this Saturday so that people can participate in the Flyway Festival. We hope everyone have really enjoyed Lia as much as I have. Lia, we had
Mark,
4 people
Mark,
at one point. It's fantastic. So,
hey, Mark, before you go, there's a couple more things on the chat people have typed in.
oh, good.
Yeah.
Great. They beat me. Let's see. I've had Lyme 3 times, but only had a rash once. All 3 times I had completely different symptoms. Wow, that's amazing. So that's it really goes hand in hand with what Lia shared with us. And then a lot of thank yous, as well as, if possible, I'd like to share a bird experience I had in Hawaii. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, I was in Hawaii in January and went to the volcano area. I was on the island of Hawaii, the Big Island, and with some people that were birding, we had seen some red and black birds that we thought perhaps were EEV, and they did tell us that yes, we'd seen a very small flock of, I think, up to 6 different EEVs in some trees overhead. They were up in the canopy in trees that had red flowers. So red and black birds and red flowers are hard to identify, but I had seen one earlier that I said, I think I just saw an EEV, and we were told that for certain we did see them. So just wanted to share that with the bird people. So it was very cool. I thought they were more rare than they are there, but they're apparently more common than I had thought.
I think the Big Island has more than Kauai. It varies from island to island, but those are beautiful birds.
Yeah, I thought maybe we had seen Apapane because they look very similar, but the beak is a little bit more curved with the EEV. So it was very fun.
A really pronounced curved bill for the EEV.
Yeah.
One other question, I think, can animals such as my dog contract Lyme? Sorry if this has already been covered.
Oh, no, sometimes I include a map. So they have the CDC map of tick-borne diseases across the US, and then the vets have a map from when they test dogs, and they have better tests for dogs. So when they test dogs and then they report it, they put together a map of those positive tests. And the map is way bigger for the dogs because there's more reporting. It's complicated, but yes, they have good tests, and they have good treatment for dogs. So yes, they definitely get Lyme disease, and so do horses, and they have better tests and easier time with treatment.
Oh, wow. Can we use the dog tests on ourselves?
That's another question. I know. Why is it so much easier? Yeah, I know. But that map is really telling, because dogs aren't usually traveling. So if it's positive in Colorado, and the Colorado State is saying, oh, we don't have Lyme disease here, but there's thousands and thousands of positive Lyme tests for those dogs probably aren't all traveling to the East Coast. So you kind of have to look at those vet maps and take them pretty seriously.
And someone asked another question, can a symptom in dogs be epileptic or seizures, or what are their symptoms?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I think about the joints and the fatigue for dogs, but certainly it can cause those things in humans. So I assume it would be possible in dogs. And like I said, ticks are dirty creatures. So there's probably other things that that it could be as well.
So
Not everything is tick-borne, but it's good to rule it out.
if we have sore joints, should we get tested for Lyme disease?
I mean, there's a cluster of symptoms that, that all kind of will point towards that. But of course, like I said, not everything is Lyme disease. Some people just have, other issues. But if it's combined with some other weird stuff, like a little bit of fatigue and a little bit of brain fog, or the pain moves around the joints, or there's cardiac issues or neurological issues. And I mean, I don't know, it all just sounds just like getting older too, but it's complicated. Sometimes it is a tick-borne disease and sometimes it's not, and you need a really good doctor to help you figure it out. And you can also do a questionnaire. There's online, I think LymeDisease.org has a questionnaire, and you can look up Lyme symptom questionnaire. Dr. Borascano has one. He's an old-time Lyme doctor, and it's about probably 50 or 80 symptoms, and you can click the answers and it'll tell you whether you likely have a tick-borne disease or not.
I think Tom and I are headed to the doctor tomorrow.
Most people are. Most people are after this talk. Yeah.
Those sore joints, Mark, I think are just old age,
Oh, shoot. I was hoping it wasn't that.
Touch
Well, thank you
arthritis.
so much, Leah, for a great talk, and thank everyone for participating. We had a lot of great questions. It was very informative. And so we'll see you again on March the 10th, Thursday, March the 10th, with Harry Fuller giving a talk on birding from Sonoma to Oregon and the Great Basin in search of great gray owls and shorebirds and many other things. So don't miss out. Harry Fuller is a very well-known birder, ornithologist, and I'm sure he's a great speaker. So don't miss his talk next month, Thursday, March the 10th. Talk to you soon, and good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Thanks for having me. And you can go to our website for more information, bayarealyme.org.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.